Okay. Well, hello. Welcome to Logos Forum. How are you doing? If this is your first time, let me give you a bit of an explanation on who we are and what we do. Logos Forum, we're here to be a broker of amazing conversations. We're here to just stir minds and talk about all things, politics, philosophy, religion, all these things, bring different people together to have just those great conversations and discussions and debates. We'll see where we get to tonight. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce our speakers. We have Maxim Bishev, here on my left, and my immediate left. He is a PhD candidate in philosophy at the Australian National University, where his research focuses on normative ethics and egoism. He teaches undergraduate courses in logic, critical thinking, ethics, and epistemology. Maxim is the founder of the Australian Centre for Objectivism. Objectivism. I'm just nervous. Okay, moving on. And has delivered lectures on capitalism, ethics, egoism, and related topics. His research has been published in the Journal of Bioethics. So give him a hand. To Maxim's left, there is Chloe Robinson. Chloe Robinson is a registered psychologist with over 10 years of clinical experience in the mental health sector. She holds degrees from the University of Wollongong and Macquarie University and has worked across Australia with children, families, and adults. Chloe specializes in issues relating to self-interest and human relationships, including stress and burnout from excessive self-sacrifice, boundary difficulties, self-esteem, attachment patterns, and balance between caring for oneself and caring for others. She draws on evidence-based therapies such as CBT, DBT, ACT, and family therapy. What's ACT? Moving on. Oh, there we go. That's why you guys are up here and not me. Anyway. Moving on. And then on Chloe's left, we have John. Oh! I shouldn't be up here. I just make mistake after mistake. Anyway, on Chloe's left is Jonathan Goulart. He is a pastor with and he's been a pastor for 20 years. His experiences in education, community leadership, organizational development. He began his career at Suncoast Christian College and has worked in teaching and behavioral management roles in schools across Australia and the United Kingdom. He currently leads the Everyday Foundation, a charity providing food relief, emergency support, and practical assistance to people experiencing poverty on the Sunshine Coast. We'll be hearing from these speakers for about 12 to 15 minutes. So, and can we give a round of applause for Jonathan? We'll be hearing from our guests for about 12 to 15 minutes, starting with, who shall we start with? Maxim. We'll start with you. Would you like to speak at the podium? Oh, yeah. Sorry. I don't know what the topic is. Is it okay to put myself first? Yes. Our topic for tonight is it okay to put yourself first. So without further ado, I will pass on to Maxim. You can speak at the podium or you can speak at your chair. It's up to you. And you have a microphone just here, right?
Okay. I feel like I'm going to trip on this. Can everyone hear me? Okay, I don't use mics often like this, so if I'm too loud or too quiet, please let me know. Good evening, everyone. The subject today asks whether it is morally defensible for you to put yourself first, to consider and act to promote your own interests before considering and acting to promote the interests of others. I will not simply answer yes to this question because it relies on a premise which I, as an objectivist, reject, The premise that my interests and the interests of others must somehow be balanced, that morality permits some egoism, but of course also demands some self-sacrifice for the sake of others. I will argue that the pursuit of one's own rational, selfish happiness is the moral purpose of life, and therefore that anything which undermines this pursuit, including giving up what one wants, that is, what one has rationally decided, accounting for the full context of the facts of one's life, is best for oneself, is immoral. By sacrifice, I do not mean trade-off. A parent who thoughtfully chose to have a child, fully accounting for the lost sleep, the stress, the expenses, and the effects it could have on their marriage, and still chose to do so because they reasoned that the joy of fostering the intellectual and moral development of a human being they created was worth these trade-offs, is not sacrificing. They are putting themselves first. Their happiness and their child's are inextricably linked. What is not linked to their happiness is the welfare of a total stranger who may or may not be responsible for their undesirable circumstances, and the mere fact of whose need, we are told, constitutes an unlimited claim on one's own resources. That is the morality of altruism, the polar opposite of the egoistic morality of Ayn Rand, which I will here defend. When most people hear the word egoism, they do not immediately think of a serious moral philosophy. They think of selfishness in the ordinary sense of the term. The bureaucrat who exploits others while insisting that he is merely looking after himself. The friend who disappears the moment integrity becomes inconvenient. The person who pursues status, pleasure, or power while disregarding the effects of his actions on others. And because we associate egoism with these kinds of cases, many of us inherit a fairly intuitive moral picture. We tend to think morality begins precisely where selfishness is restrained. The moral person is the one capable of sacrifice. The immoral person is the one who places his own desires above everything else. And importantly, this moral framework is not obviously wrong. Human beings are capable of cruelty, vanity, appetite, narcissism, cowardice, and indifference. Entire societies can become organized around domination. So it is understandable that many moral traditions place limits upon self-interest at the center of ethics. When we think of morally admirable people, we often think of people who sacrifice something. The parent who gives up comfort and sleep for a child. The friend who remains loyal through hardship. The firefighter who enters a burning building for strangers. The doctor who accepts personal risk during an epidemic. These actions appear noble, partly because they involve placing something beyond oneself at the center of one's concern. And so many people come to regard sacrifice itself as morally significant. Against this background, Ayn Rand can initially sound deeply counterintuitive. Rand does not merely argue that individuals matter too, or that personal happiness has some moral importance. She questions whether self-sacrifice should be treated as the essence of morality at all. Now, before looking at Rand's argument directly, I think it helps to pause and ask a deeper question. Where do moral concepts come from in the first place? Why do concepts like good, bad, value, and ought exist at all? A rock does not need morality. A corpse does not pursue values. The universe itself does not issue commandments. So what features of reality make the concept of value necessary? This is where Rand begins, with the phenomenon of life itself. Rand argues that values arise only in the context of living organisms. A plant must obtain sunlight and nutrients. An animal must obtain food and shelter. Living things can succeed or fail in sustaining themselves. And this introduces a possibility absent from non-living matter, the alternative of life or death. A value, Rand says, is that which one acts to gain and or keep. Without living beings, nothing could count as beneficial or harmful because nothing would possess needs, vulnerabilities, goals, or requirements. Now, this point alone does not establish egoism. What it does establish is that morality must somehow emerge from the requirements of life. The next question then becomes, what does human life specifically require? And here Rand observes that human beings survive differently from other organisms. Human beings do not survive primarily through instinct. We survive through reason, through thought, judgment, planning, production, knowledge, long-term action. Reason is a volitional faculty, and we are capable of refusing to use it. A human being can evade reality, conform uncritically, live parasitically on the efforts or judgment of others, and sacrifice their own long-term flourishing for short-term appetite or social approval. This is why Rand places rationality at the center of ethics, not because reason is socially useful, though it is, not because rationality is divinely commanded by God, but because reason is man's basic means of survival. And this is where Rand's argument becomes controversial. If morality arises from the requirements of a human life, then morality must fundamentally concern the flourishing of the person whose life is being lived. Rand believed many moral traditions had gradually disconnected morality from this purpose. Instead of asking what kind of life allows a human being to flourish, they increasingly treated morality as fundamentally a matter of self-sacrifice. Now, Rand's objection is not to kindness, generosity, friendship, or concern for others, nor does she deny that people may rationally make trade-offs for those they deeply value. Her criticism is directed specifically at sacrifice as a moral ideal in itself. And I think this becomes clear when we turn to her novel, The Fountainhead, which follows the life and career of the uncompromising and independent architect Howard Roark. In this novel, Peter Keating is perhaps the clearest example of a man who lacks independence. Superficially, Keating appears selfish. He pursues prestige, admiration, fashionable success, and professional status. He's highly sensitive to how others perceive him and gradually organizes his entire life around external validation. But Keating lacks an independent self altogether. Very early in life, Keating abandons what he genuinely values, a career in painting, in order to become what others will admire. He studies architecture less from love of the work itself than from its promise of prestige. Throughout the novel, he repeatedly looks outward to determine what he should want. This eventually destroys his capacity for authentic desire. The most tragic example appears in his relationship with Catherine Halsey, the woman he genuinely loves but refuses to marry because the marriage would not advance his ambitions. Instead, he marries the beautiful Dominique Franken, who does not love him and who married him to punish herself, two facts of which he is aware, but she raises his social status. He gave up Katie, the woman he really wanted to marry a woman who would impress others. Years later, when it is far too late to reverse course, Keating meets Katie again and says to her in a revealing and uncharacteristically honest moment, quote, "Katie, why do they always teach us that it's easy and evil to do what we want and that we need discipline to restrain ourselves? It's the hardest thing in the world to do what we want, and it takes the greatest kind of courage. I mean, what we really want, as I wanted to marry you, not as I want to sleep with some woman or get drunk or get my name in the papers. Those things, they're not even desires. They're things people do to escape from desires, because it's such a big responsibility, really, to want something." End quote. What is striking about this passage is that Keating gradually realizes most of what he pursued was not in his genuine self-interest at all. The hunger for status, the pursuit of recognition, the social climbing. These were not expressions of an independent self. They were ways of escaping the burden of identifying and committing oneself to what one actually values. Now, a different character in The Fountainhead, Gail Wynand, appears very different. Wynand becomes one of the most powerful media figures in New York. He shapes public opinion, destroys enemies, influences politics, and accumulates enormous wealth and power. At first glance, he appears closer to the ordinary stereotype of egoism, dominant, ambitious, and unapologetically powerful. But Rand gradually reveals that Wynand also remains psychologically dependent on others. His empire depends upon giving the public what it wants, while secretly despising the public for wanting it. Even his domination of others appears reactive. His consciousness is still fundamentally oriented around society rather than his own independent judgment. Later in the novel, Winand attempts to use his immense influence to defend Howard Roark publicly, and he discovers that the very machinery of public opinion he spent decades cultivating ultimately controls him. Winand possesses power over people, but not independence from them. Howard Roark is different from both men. Roark is often described within the novel as arrogant or selfish, but what distinguishes him is not appetite, domination, or social ambition. It is his completely independent mind. Early in the novel, Roark is expelled from architecture school because he refuses to imitate historical styles he regards as dishonest. Later, he works in a granite quarry rather than compromise his architectural vision merely to satisfy fashionable expectations. Roark is not motivated by rebellion for its own sake either. He is not driven by hatred of society or desire for approval. His orientation is toward the work itself, toward creation, reality, and rationally chosen values. At one point, Roark is asked whether he wishes to serve humanity through architecture, and he replies, "I don't build in order to have clients. I have clients in order to build." Roark's life is not organized around domination of others, nor around submission to them. His life is organized around the pursuit of values he rationally endorses. And this is why Rand regards him as the genuine egoist. What we ordinarily call selfishness is often not genuine self-interest at all. It is dependence on approval, dependence on status, dependence on social validation or power over others. For Rand, genuine egoism means something much more demanding: the capacity to live according to rationally chosen values grounded in reality rather than conformity or sacrificial obligation. At this point, I want to read a short passage from Rand that captures the essence of her criticism of altruism, the moral opposite of genuine egoism. Quote, "What is the moral code of altruism? The basic principle of altruism is that man has no right to exist for his own sake, that service to others is the only justification of his existence, that self-sacrifice is his highest moral duty, virtue, and value. Do not confuse altruism with kindness, goodwill, or respect for the rights of others. These are not primaries but consequences which altruism makes impossible. The irreducible primary of altruism, the basic absolute, is self-sacrifice, which means self-immolation, self-abnegation, self-denial, self-destruction, which means the self as a standard of evil, the selfless as a standard of the good. Do not hide behind such superficialities as whether you should or should not give a dime to a beggar. That is not the issue. The issue is whether you do or do not have the right to exist without giving him that dime. The issue is whether you must keep buying your life, dime by dime, from any beggar who might choose to approach you. The issue is whether the need of others is the first mortgage on your life and the moral purpose of your existence. The issue is whether man is to be regarded as a sacrificial animal. Any man of self-esteem will answer no. Altruism says yes." Now, whether one ultimately agrees with Rand or not, I think her philosophy forces us to confront an important question. What is morality for? Is morality about self-sacrifice? Or is morality about understanding the conditions under which a rational human being can flourish? Rand's answer was controversial because she identified the root of morality in the objective requirements of an individual human life. For those of you interested in learning more about objectivism, I highly recommend The Fountainhead. That book set me on my course. It played a major role in shaping the path that led me into philosophy, into graduate study, and ultimately into building the Australian Centre for Objectivism. I suspect it will continue shaping my life for decades to come. I'd like to conclude with a brief quotation from Rand summarizing her philosophy. Quote, "My philosophy, in essence, is the concept of man as a heroic being, with his own happiness as the highest moral purpose of his life, with productive achievement as his noblest activity, and reason as his only absolute." Thank you.
Okay, without further ado, I would like to invite Chloe up to the podium. And you have 15 minutes starting from when you start.
All right, wonderful. So my name's Chloe. As mentioned, I'm a psychologist by trade and by ethos, I guess. I'm here to share a bit of a psychological perspective in terms of what does psychology say about this topic of is it okay to put yourself first, and also to share a bit about what I see clinically in the practice. Before I jump in, I will just start with an acknowledgement. So I wish to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people as traditional custodians of the land in which we're meeting on, and recognise any other people or families with connections to the land of ACT and the surrounding region. I also wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contribution they make to the life of this city and this region as a whole. I would also like to acknowledge and welcome other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be attending today. In terms of an outline, because I'm that kind of gal, I'm going to sort of cover very lightly in terms of what is self-interest, what does it look like, why do we do it? Self-sacrifice, the same. What does it look like, why do we do it? Is there such a thing as too much of one or the other? From there, I'll share some insights from the therapeutic space in terms of how it shows up in the clinic room and why people seek help when it is too much. Bit of a balancing act. A bit of a balancing act of how do we find the sweet spot when it comes to doing this in life and finding the balance of what this looks like for us. I'll talk about one of the essential elements that I believe that we should all have when it comes to finding that balance, and then some of the practical elements of what it can actually look like in our day-to-day life. So that's me. So self-interest, so that is essentially any actions or desires that are primarily motivated by personal benefit or by our own advantage. This can look like pursuing a career, a particular role that we want in life, starting a business. It can be social connection, it can be prioritising healthy habits, sleep, diet, exercise. It can be investing in education, whether it's further education, tertiary, TAFE, or any sort of professional development. It can be for financial gain, so saving, investing, taking a job with higher pay, and it can be around just pursuing your own interests, your own goals, and even your hobbies. From a political perspective, it's even voting preferences. Who do we vote for, and does that influence what we're likely to benefit from that as well? So why do we do it? There's a few kind of leading principles and there's a few different theories out there, but the core of them come down to a couple of key ones. One being evolutionary. So for us to survive, for us to pass on our genes to the next generation, that's sort of seen as one of the primary reasons why we're self-interested in the first place. The next one is relational. So to enhance our connections, to enhance our social connection with other people. Being social beings, I mean, they're all kind of closely tied, but we're social beings, so that's a key driver as well. Another one is our well-being. So both physical and our emotional well-being, they benefit from doing the things that we like doing and doing the stuff that we want to see in life. And of course, the cultural and societal influence as well. They play a huge role in terms of what we do and why we do it. The benefits of being self-interested, we get emotional satisfaction, we get mental well-being, there's social well-being, social status. We see improved physical health as well when we prioritise ourselves. We see career satisfaction and better career prospects, as well as financial status or our financial position. On the flip side, self-sacrifice. So what is it? So that's choosing to act in a way where it benefits others, society, our community, and it may not have, and unlikely to have, immediate benefit on yourself. So what does it look like in practice? This is emotional support for others. It could be caregiving, so parental or other, volunteering your time, your resources, community support, contribution, financial support like donations or, helping someone on the street. Relational, could be like you have a partner who they've got certain career goals or certain health goals, and you sacrifice what you want to do to support them in that endeavour. And of course there's the acts of heroism, which isn't for most of us, but it definitely is in there. So our soldiers, our emergency services personnel, defence, and just the people on the street who jump out and help people when they don't have to. So why do we do it? Again, a bunch of different theories out there, but it does come down to I guess, the leading ideas. Altruism, love and attachment, survival, our moral and ethical values in terms of what we think we should do and why we should do it, and I guess the larger societal and cultural expectations as well, and also our to improve our own self-worth and our sense of significance in life. The benefits, they're also really good. So it improves our mental health and our well-being. We get stronger social connections and relationships, an increased sense of purpose, meaning in life, increased sense of self-esteem and self-worth, and it also has this contagion effect. So when other people see us doing it, they're more likely to do it themselves as well. So how much is too much? Is there such a thing as too much? Short answer, yes. I think so. So there's this idea that for self-sacrifice, when I'll get to the balance part, but basically yes. And what it looks like, it can look like mental health and emotional problems when we are too self-sacrificing. So burnout, exhaustion, resentment, anxiousness. It can lead to relationship difficulties, potentially exploitation within relationships. It can lead to potentially a loss of personal identity and what that looks like for us, as well as physical health, headaches, fatigue, digestive issues, immune system problems, things like that. But the other one's just as bad, really, which is not great. But too much self-interest, it can lead to social isolation, it can lead to relationship difficulties or increased conflict, it can lead to exhaustion as well and reduced empathy for ourselves and people around us, and also it can really impact our own, I guess, headspace in terms of the rumination or potentially detachment from what's happening in reality and what's happening around us. So clinically, what do I see in therapy? More often than not, and you asked me this earlier, more often than not, what I actually see is an imbalance or an unhealthy version of self-sacrifice. And what it looks like is anxiety and stress. It can look like burnout, resentment, exhaustion, frustration, or excessive guilt. It can look like relationship difficulties, so a power imbalance or exploitation within relationships. It can also be just a sense of emptiness or a lack of purpose. So people get to a certain point in life and they think, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And that can cause a whole host of other kind of struggles and questions and difficulties for them. And again, a loss of identity. That's a really big one. And often that one's really tied to, I guess, careers and also parenting. It's a huge one that comes up clinically. Where does it come from? Comes from our early years, like really early on in development. It often stems from needs being unmet or being overshadowed. It can be from early caregiving roles, and what I mean by that is when a child's expected to almost take care of their parent, either physically or emotionally, at an age that isn't developmentally appropriate. So not a bad thing, but it can really push people in a direction that's not working for them. Family systems, this one's really, this one's not usually explicit, it's really an implicit pattern of operating in a family. So it can be things like, we avoid conflict at all costs. Or it can be around the idea of being self-sufficient. So being so self-sufficient that we don't rely on anyone else, we don't ask for help, and we always have to do it alone. So these things can all contribute to this over self-sacrificing, or this unhealthy version. The other thing that comes up is around safety and belonging. So if safety and belonging is a conditional component to getting love and respect in your family, that can also mean this self-sacrificing comes out in a really unhealthy way over time. So where do we go from here? Essentially, it's about finding the sweet spot of balancing the two. So I am of the opinion that we actually need to have both to have a fulfilling and a meaningful life. Having one doesn't land us in a good place, and being right on the other end doesn't lead us in a good place either. So it's about finding this balance, and it's about honouring both in our life. The kicker is that there's no perfect version of this. There's no perfect script of what it should look like or what sort of activities it is. It's very personal, and it's going to be different depending on your life, the different contextual factors, where you are, different stages of life. It's going to be different, and it's going to keep changing too. There is one, I guess, essential ingredient that I think is needed in terms of it being a sustainable practice, and that's the idea around making sure that your own cup, you've sort of filled your own cup, and you've got enough so that you can give for yourself, but also you can give to other people. So if we give and give and give and give to the point of self-depletion, we're not better off. And we can't keep giving. We can't give our best selves. So it's this push-pull around, supporting yourself, but also being able to do that so you can support others if that's really important to you. Yeah, filling your own cup or the oxygen mask, that's the same kind of thing. Putting your own oxygen mask on first before we support other people. Seems very counterintuitive, but it gives us sustainability in this practice. Yeah. In terms of how we achieve this balance practically, because it's great for me to sit up here and talk about high-level stuff, but the practicality part of it is important too. Can't help myself, I'm a psychologist. So the first thing is getting curious. What is my current split? Where do I feel like I am when it comes to self-sacrificing? Where do I feel like I am when it comes to self-interest? And self-interest is more than self-care. I'll talk about that in a moment. But it's where do I feel like I fall into this realm? The second thing is to think about what's driving my behaviour. Why is it that I'm choosing to do this? What's really pushing me in this direction? Is it because I'm pushing towards something that I want, or am I doing it because I'm actually avoiding something? It's sort of this choice of control. So there's this push-pull that we experience in life, and a lot of choices, some will argue, is either towards a behaviour or away from something. So it's just getting curious about that. There's no right or wrong with this stuff. It's just figuring out why am I doing it and what's motivating this from, for me. Step 3, make a plan. Let's get intentional about what you want to do and why you want to do it. And it's even looking at what are you currently doing and is that still serving you? Does that still work for you with your life and with your context and with your passions? What actually works? So you can look at, and you can break it down, you can be really particular around this. You can look at your mental health, your physical health, you can look at your career and kind of workspace. It can be sort of, occupational, sort of falls in that realm as well. 3 minutes, ding ding. Relationships and social connection is a big one as well, personal growth, and then just overall life satisfaction. So you can really dig into each area and figure out, actually, is this space working for me, and go from there. In terms of what it might look like, and I give this as very broad examples, y'all will have to find your own version of what it looks like, but in terms of adding more self-interest, what does that actually look like? Carving out time each day, each week, each month, for self-care. I know I can't help myself again. Prioritising sleep, diet and exercise. I will harp on about this. It is a hill I will die on. You've got to get yourself good enough so that you can do this stuff sustainably and live the life that you want to live, whichever version that is. Setting healthy boundaries. This is a tricky one. And when we talk about boundaries, it's a very easy way just to say, just say no more. What does it actually look like, and where are the different areas in life? Boundaries can be really far-reaching. There's physical boundaries, there's emotional boundaries, there's mental boundaries, there's our time boundaries, and there's material boundaries. So again, get curious. What am I doing with these areas? Are there certain areas where I do really well, and others that maybe I could, look at and do a bit of a review? Assertive communication, another hard one. How do we express our feelings, our opinions, and our needs in a way that's clear and respectful? We could do a whole talk on that, but I won't today. Self-compassion, a really big one. Self-compassion comes into, I guess, both for ourselves, but also for other people too. So compassion is huge. And engage in hobbies and activities that bring you joy. What are the things that you want to do? What are the things that you don't want to do? If you're doing something that doesn't bring you joy anymore, you don't have to do it, especially if it's a hobby. Some things you have to do in life. But do the things that you want to do. Start the project that you wanted to start. Start that weird little hobby. Give it a go. Adding more self-sacrifice. I'm hearing you. I'm on my last bit. Self-sacrificing. What does that look like? That can be our pro-social behaviours. Volunteering, mentoring, getting involved in your community, whatever that might look like. Social support, emotional support for your friends, for your family, your fellow students, whoever that is. Could be financial support if that's a position that you're able to do. Donations, pay it forward, different things. Activism, advocacy, that's a place that we can all kind of step into. It doesn't require necessarily a cost, and there's so much online these days, which is wonderful. So politically, environmentally, humanitarian, pick one and run with it. Pick something that you're passionate about and follow it. And heroic acts. Not exactly an everyday example, but there's elements there as well, depending on maybe you want to join SES or something, I'm not sure. Start with one thing. Pick something from your list and just start with one thing. Build your confidence, build your belief, and then build your tolerance to that change, and then add more if you want. You don't have to change your whole life. Start with one thing. And then, once you're happy with that, review the plan. Life is dynamic. Life is not stagnant. Review it. If it's not working for you anymore, that's okay. Go back to the plan, pick something else, tweak it around, change it. It's all okay. Do you ride solo? Do you bring in the supports? Do you bring in the troops? What do we do? You can do this stuff individually. If you're listening and going, yeah, I can do this. This is like, I got this in the bag. Do it. Love it. If you're looking at it and thinking, oh God, this is completely daunting. I'm completely overwhelmed with where do I start? Or I just find it too hard. There's online resources, podcasts, books, blogs. There's a whole world online. And there's also professional support as well. If you want someone to walk along that journey with you, that's always an option as well. So that's my 15 minutes plus.
Awesome.
Thank you.
You just leave it there. Yeah, all good. All right. Well, thank you, Chloe. Last but not least, Jono. Let's give him a hand as it comes up.
Thank you, Azza.
Don't call me
Yeah,
that.
okay.
Don't call me that.
Thank
here.
you.
That's
I can smell the food, so I'm going to be as quick as I can so we can all get eating and hopefully come back with some great Q&A. And just well done, everyone, for being here. You could be at home doom scrolling and just watching everyone else, but you're in a room, like looking at people and thinking about important topics. This is really good. So honestly, I applaud you and appreciate you for doing that. And thank you guys for what you've shared. Maxim, you're probably the smartest guy I've ever listened to. And that was incredible. And I'm definitely going to have some different opinions to you. So, and Chloe, I felt like that was free therapy for everyone in the room. So thank you very much. Okay, jumping into it. Is it okay to put myself first? Well, I think if you want to live a happy and meaningful life, the answer is absolutely no. I really thought about this because I think the term self is a complex idea now, more than ever before. It was probably simple many eons ago, but now we mean so many different things by the idea of self. And unfortunately, in the culture we're all baptized in, particularly in the modern West, I think there's a lot of toxic traits around the idea of self and what we mean by that. And I don't think we're better off for it as a community, as a society. Look at the extreme end. You've got ideas like hyper-individualism now, which is rampant, and people aren't happier for it. People are miserable. And I'm not a big philosopher. I work in practice. I work in pastoral care, and I've seen the results of people who repeatedly put themselves as number one, not just in their own life, but in the world. They think the world revolves around them, and they're consistently angry at the world. They're consistently disappointed in themselves. And I know I'm talking to one extreme, but you've got to wrestle with the idea if something is true. You want to test it out at its limits to see if this works. I think part of this, I know he's discredited a lot, but Freud in the psychological world has certainly brought this idea in many regards, I think has permeated a lot of our culture now around this idea of that the full fulfillment of self is found in pleasure, what makes you happy. And I think he narrowed it in the idea that was particularly in light if you narrow it down to something physical, which really he then defined, if you think about it, that our lives are nothing more than merely flesh and blood, which I think is a real shame because there's more to you than flesh and blood. Now, no doubt about it, this is certainly one way to live, I guess, if you want to live purely for the things that make you feel happy in the moment. You can do that, no one's stopping you. But pastorally working with flesh and blood human beings for the past 2 decades, I can tell you that people who live consistently this way, at best, their lives end up miserable, and at worst, they become suicidal because they realize they can't hold up the universe on their own shoulders. And if they are consistently trying to put themselves first in their life, what happens when you realize that you keep letting yourself down and that things don't go according to plan and that life is outside often of our control? Nothing wrong with pleasure. There's nothing wrong with who we are. But if that becomes the center of our universe, there's going to be an imbalance there. Let me give you an example in my own life. Not very philosophical, but kind of earthy. I love ice cream very, very much. And I might even go get some tonight. What's that good one down on Lonsdale Street? Messina. Might get some for breakfast tomorrow. No, I love it. Brings me great pleasure. There's nothing good physically about it other than it tastes great. And if I consistently use the idea that I want ice cream, makes me happy in the moment. I know this is a very shallow idea, but I'm just unpacking an idea. If I consistently put that need and desire first in my life, it might make me feel great in the moment, but 5 seconds later, I'm going to be miserable, I'm going to feel guilty, and then I'll eventually have the physical and mental health that will follow having a diet of nothing but ice cream. And I see that often as what happens, again, pastorally in people's lives when their pleasure and what makes them feel good, consistently putting that first, ultimately leads to putting themselves last. I help to direct an organization called the Everyday Foundation, and we deal in food insecurity. We feed thousands of people every week. And within that, we have a lot of volunteers who come and give their time. And I've seen people who have had the utmost of everything our culture values, successful in their career, all the money, all the relationships, and yet, in some regard, they come in extremely empty, and they're like, I'm looking for something. And when they start to find themselves contributing to others, to strangers, people that are on a regular basis, not just to feel good, but to do something of meaning with their life, they found incredible meaning and fulfillment in the life that they give away. Jesus of Nazareth, with whom I get my worldview around this, he put it this way. He said, if you seek, this is fascinating to me, he said, if you seek to save your life, in other words, if you seek to put your life first, make yourself number one, if you seek to save your life, you will lose it. But if you lose your life for something higher, you will find it. And I know Max and you touched earlier on the idea of parenting. I have two little girls, and they are the naughtiest two human beings you'll ever meet. Utterly cheeky in every single way and never listen to my instruction until they want some food, and then they become very obedient. But here's the thing, I wrestled with the idea of, do I want to bring a child into this world? How does that work? And I had a lot of friends who said, it make me very happy and it's very fulfilling, all these beautiful things. And it dawned on me, if I put that pressure on my children to meet my needs of happiness and fulfillment, that is far too much pressure to put on a child. But if I go with the Jesus way, if I see my purpose isn't to take meaning from my children, but rather give meaning to my children, if I lose myself, and as you mentioned, yes, lose sleep and a lot of it, and I give of myself entirely, then it's amazing how fulfillment and happiness has come not with me trying to take life, but rather me giving life away. And again, returning to the words of Jesus of Nazareth, he himself, I think, was the most inspiring figure. Throughout history, he's led to more hospitals, schools, good work, and nations all around the planet for the past 2,000 years. He himself said it this way. He says, I didn't come to be served, but to serve, and to give my life a ransom for many. So I think about that. Arguably one of the most influential figures in all of human history, and his whole drive was not to be served by people, but to serve and give his life away. And I'm certainly no expert at this and certainly get it wrong on the daily, but I'm committed to this idea that true life, meaning, and fulfillment is not in me putting myself first. It doesn't mean you have to put yourself ultimately last, it's just I am not the center of my universe, and I think that's exactly where happiness and fulfillment lies. That is me. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, before we go off and discuss about the last 30 minutes, 40 minutes, let me just show you to the screen for a second. So we have something called Menti coming. Guys, need to put it on in a second. We have a system called Menti, and it's a way in which you can, if you scan the QR code, you can ask your questions for all the speakers or a specific speaker. And the idea is, from this place, myself and the speakers will try and collectively hold a shared discussion around these questions. So get your phones out, scan away, and yeah, that's all good. Right, let's get into the second part of our evening, which is food and having a bit of a break. All right, well, welcome to part 2 of Logos Forum. Well, technically food was part 2. This is part 3. But this is where we get to have a shared discussion. We can even get into a little bit of debate if we want to, if our speakers are so inclined. But just, we're here to try and hold a shared discussion amongst everyone here. Okay? So, let's get started with maybe questions you have for each other. Let's go there. Who wants to start? By the way, you've got microphones at your feet. You should have microphones at your feet. There's one there. Ugh. You can have this one. How about that? And you pass that one mic down to Chloe. There you go. Why don't you share a little bit about what struck you about each other's opening arguments? Yeah, you can get rid of that music now. It's distracting.
I was vibing it too much.
Yeah. Someone can start.
Okay, I'll just start.
Yeah.
So, my question to both of you, and I suppose Chloe sort of took a more middle position on this, whereas Jono took a position more clearly opposed to mine. And what we seem to... Let's start with what we agree on, because I've been told I need to be more conciliatory. So... Yeah, so we seem to agree on the enormous benefits that a person gains from focusing on their own well-being, at least in your cases to some extent. I would say to the full extent. What we may disagree on is whether or not any altruism is justified. So I've taken the position that altruism, that is actually sacrificing, not trading off, but giving up in exchange for something that gives you less or gives you nothing, is never morally justified. And I take it you both would, to various extents, disagree with that. So my question is, what justifies altruism on your views?
I'll give it a shot. So unapologetically, my worldview, as I said earlier, is shaped a lot by the Christian faith. And part of that idea that's proposed is that humanity is indeed really fallen, and that we've shown time and time again our inability to make healthy, life-giving decisions, even as technology has increased, our philosophical grounding has increased, content has increased, but yet it seems like human welfare continues to go down. Your industry keeps going up. It's just the reality of it. The needs seem ever more. And so I'm always a bit suspicious on certain philosophies that sound terrific on paper in argument, but don't unpack in reality. And my experience with reality is that left to our own devices, we seem to, again, it's an extreme case, but we seem to do a lot of harm to our neighbor and to one another. And the Christian principle said that wasn't the intention of the beginning, that things were created good, but because, as you propagated earlier, the free will that we have as free moral agents, we continually make wrong decisions. And so in light of that, the only restoration back that humanity have to have hope within the world we have is because the sacrifice of Jesus Christ enabled that. And so I see the idea of divine sacrifice as being the grounding on which we can know ultimate hope, ultimate freedom, and ultimate fulfillment. That's where I guess my pushback would come on that, because I look at the ultimate sacrifice in Christ.
I think from my perspective and what I see, I'm talking too quietly again, I've been told. I need to project my voice. No, don't. I think the idea, and for me, it's, as I talked about before, that sweet spot, that balance. If we sit so solely on one side, even if we think it's good, or even if we think that's what we want, from what I see in practice and clinically, is that it actually doesn't work out. We're not better off for it. So, I don't know if I answered your question fully, but in reality and in practice, it doesn't actually land us in a good place.
May I push back? May I ask leading questions?
Let's go.
Let's go.
Okay, unless the audience wants to.
Don't worry, I'll bring them in.
Okay.
That's my job.
So before the event began, Chloe, I was asking you about your practice in psychology, and you told me that you dealt with two opposite kinds of cases: people who sacrifice too much and people who sacrifice too little. You know, evil egoists like me. And
For reference, I did not say that.
I saw how you looked at me when you said that. No.
Some work to do here. Okay.
So, yeah. So, now, the examples you gave include narcissism, isolating oneself, ruining one's relationships with others. Yeah, these are all bad things, but that's not in the interests of these people. So, when I defend egoism, actually this goes to Jono's point, I am not defending hedonism, right? I'm not defending just the mindless, emotionalistic pursuit of pleasure. I am defending a completely rational approach to one's own happiness. That often requires going against whatever one feels like doing in the moment. And it often requires really moderating one's communication with others and so on in such a way as not to be like an obnoxious person, but to get the most value out of other people. You can think of other people, I mean, people vary in quality enormously, right? Moral quality. Leonard Peikoff, who is a philosopher who advocates the same philosophy that I do, he said, in reference to dealing with others, if you have a rare and exquisite violin, would you use it as a sledgehammer? Well, that rare and exquisite violin can be another person, and to use them as a sledgehammer is not in your interests. Anyway, please comment.
I'll be honest, I'm not sure what the question actually is.
Oh,
but
yes, yeah. So my question is, but aren't these people, these so-called selfish people, not really selfish at all? Because they are self-sabotaging, they are not being rational in achieving their own happiness by acting in the manner you described.
That's a good question. I think the part that sticks out for me is that, in my perspective, we are never truly rational. So how do we truly, because we're such emotional beings, so much of what we do is based on emotion and our feelings, so how can we ever truly be rational, and how can that be an absolute truth in our pursuit? I don't know, and there's maybe not a question, but would you like to add? I don't know, I think that the basis of that, for me, doesn't match up as the human experience.
So reason is a capacity that we have, right? We have the capacity of reason just in the same way that birds have wings. The fact that birds have wings does not mean every bird is flying at every moment, right? And so when I say being rational, I mean guiding one's actions by reason. Now, that means thinking hard about what is really in one's best interests and what kind of life project one wishes to make for oneself, and then pursuing that. So, I mean, we often hear that people aren't rational. I think we should be precise in what is meant by that. It means some people, or many people, perhaps most people, a lot of the time are not rational, right? But that does not change the fact that it is our reason that is our means of survival, and that everything that is good about human life, that is not just a fact of wilderness or nature like oxygen, comes from human rationality. That's the fountainhead of all the values.
Yeah, but this is what I was trying to touch on before around
2 more minutes and we'll go on to
around
the first
a cultural perspective of that, because our view, this is why maybe defining terms is important, you know, a rational view of certain things to someone with a different worldview or different upbringing or culture might view some of my rational approaches to things as abhorrent to them or harmful, you know, and so, and not just in different cultures, but different ages and different times, right? So you kind of using this universal idea that's been human rationality or reason that's brought us here, but arguably throughout the course of history, what someone would have argued as the rational thing would look back now in an enlightened state and go, well, that was definitely not rational. That's what I'm trying to wrap my head around. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm trying to get this idea. You think there is a universal idea of rationality that everyone at all times in all situations could agree on?
Well, Ayn Rand defines reason as the faculty which identifies and integrates the data provided by man's senses, right? So we have percepts, like I'm looking around now, every person I see is a percept, every chair is a percept. That the reason is what integrates that and makes sense of it, basically makes me understand. And then I use concepts to think. I mean, we can go into epistemology, but I don't think that's necessary here. Now, to defend my claim that reason is the fountainhead of all values, what I mean is just look around us now. We are using microphones. We have cameras recording us. Everybody found out about this event, presumably online or from seeing posters. We are in a very well-designed building. The lights work. We all have access to medicine, etc. All of that was not built on people's feelings. That was all built on people with thinking in a completely cold, rational, and often passionate way, right? So I don't think emotions are opposed to reason. They're just a different faculty, and they have a place. What I'm saying is they don't have a place in being the standard by which we ought to judge our actions. If they were, then we would just be hedonists. And
I understand that, but none of us live in a vacuum. So we do live in a world in which we don't all operate on that same level playing field of constantly thinking rationally about things in the same way. So as much as rationality and emotion are in two different fields, they do live side by side together all the time. And we all make emotional decisions that, to our perspective, seem to be in the moment the most rational thing. But you know what I mean? So we don't live in if I lived by myself in a building, fair enough, in the wilderness, that I would agree with you wholeheartedly. But I see we live in a reality right now where even with all of our rationality, people still suffer, and there's still brokenness, and there's still injustice. Not just out there, even in our little local entities here, So that's, I still rest with the idea, and I come back still to thinking the core root of some of these things isn't that we don't have rational abilities to think clearly. It's that the sense of egoism still drives people to have their dominant view of the world or what they want above someone else having what they want. And I think that continually hurts people over and over again in our communities. And I think that the antidote to that is people laying that down. So it's not necessarily always self-sacrifice, but often laying your preference down to allow someone else theirs.
These are really great thoughts. We're now going to open this up to the audience. So let's go with our first question. My team are going to put the top voted questions up on the board. I've left my little perch so I can read and roam around. And okay. First question to Jono. From your Christian perspective, is there not a mandate to love others as you love yourself? Good thought. If one does not put themselves first, i.e. loving themselves, how can one love others? Just so you know, you can identify yourself or you can remain anonymous. And if you've got some questions off the back of this, just raise your hand, I'll throw you the microphone. Not literally.
Can I ask who asked this question?
You don't need to. I'll do that. That's my job.
Because I've got I need to clarify a few things from this because there's two ideas kind of meshed in there. And it might just help anyone to be brave and put their head say, I asked this.
You don't have to.
Okay. From your Christian perspective, is there not a mandate? Yes, Jesus definitely did say we're to love one another as we love ourselves. So if one does not put themselves first, i.e. loving themselves, how come... So that goes with an assumption that what Jesus was talking about there, to love yourself means to put yourself first. I don't necessarily think that's what Jesus was saying there, that loving yourself is to put yourself first. So I'll just say that. That's
all
my
you want
answer.
to say?
I don't think Jesus was saying there about loving as you love yourself. He was arguing a case there for putting yourself first.
Does anyone have any thoughts that they would like to add to this? Maybe the person who did ask the question could say something and still not own up to it. Yes, let's go. No. I give you the microphone. This is how this works.
Maybe maybe this is where there's a bit of an overlap between the consequences of living rationally or living like by like living for others, because if you like this is a rational interpretation of how people should interact with each other, in that like in that like you have in that like this concept acknowledges the fact that people become happy by like interacting positively with others around them, and that like they project their happiness onto others. So if they themselves are more happy, then others will be more happy. And then perhaps like perhaps the answer is not to live for others, but to live for yourself in a way that respects the way that others also live for themselves, and then acknowledging that like all humans have a social aspect, and then and that like people should like in order to live for themselves, they have to positively interact with others. Like that is a way to live for yourself.
Yeah, that's a really good point, man. I think as well, maybe it's understanding, for whatever reason in our culture, and I'm happy for pushback on this, it's like we've put happiness as our highest ideal for some reason, and I understand who doesn't want to be happy. But I wonder if happiness is more a byproduct of a higher pursuit rather than the goal. And if we keep making the goal, I want to be happy, and then that's open to interpretation. What do we mean by happiness? I wonder if there's a different way of approaching it. Happiness is a byproduct. It's like one day you go, golly, this wasn't my goal. I had a higher ideal out here to make a difference, or to improve or to serve others, or leverage the gifts I have and resources I have to make the world more livable or inhabitable or a better place for others. And as a byproduct, I'm like, I'm less miserable. Or like, the sun's shining. And I think this is partly what Jesus was getting at here as well. But I think if happiness becomes a thing, I think it eludes us over and over again, and we've made the wrong thing a god or an idol in our lives. My happiness is supreme. I think that's a horrible way to live. I think if you discover happiness as a gift of a higher pursuit, what a blessing. And I'm hunting that all my life to find that now.
Well, I completely disagree. Because unlike God, my happiness exists. There is no higher pursuit than one's own happiness. So now, one other less inflammatory point I wanted to make. You mentioned that we don't achieve happiness by directly aiming at it. Yes? I actually agree with that. In the sense that there are two levels here. This is actually something I'm writing a little bit about in my PhD, is the justificatory level. That is, by what standard do we justify an action? And there I'm very clearly endorsing egoism. An action is right if it is going to benefit me, if it's good for my actual, like if it really does benefit me, if it really is good for my happiness, then that's what makes it good. That's what justifies it. So that sets the justificatory standard. But there's also the deliberative standard. And the deliberative standard is, well, okay, but in my day-to-day decision making, do I just use that same principle of, well, what's going to make me happy? What's going to make me happy? And of course not. I mean, when I'm working and I don't necessarily feel like revising this paragraph for the 7th time, I'm not asking myself, is this making me happy? The answer is not right now, you know. But you have to guide your deliberation by more kind of secondary principles, to use a term from John Stuart Mill. So one thing I'm doing in my thesis is actually looking at some of these principles in utilitarianism, which is this sort of second-order deliberation, and applying some of those principles to deliberating about egoism. Just a small tangent. Yeah. Chloe, you haven't spoken for a while. If you want to add anything. Yeah.
I think for me, life is more than just one emotion or chasing one particular thing. So it's not necessarily about happiness or love specifically, but it's around the complexity of all of it. If we just experience one thing, that would be a shame. Even if it's a positive or a good kind of feeling, I just think we would lose out so much. And so for me, it's around how do we experience the breadth that life brings us. And, you know, even through hardship and grief and, you know, sadness, even the things that do they're not good feelings. They don't leave us feeling great. I think they give us a rich and a complex life, which is far more meaningful, and rather than a very, I guess, single sort of dimensional way of viewing what am I chasing, but it's more about the experience from my perspective.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. 'Cause
We're just starting to get good.
I'm
but
sorry,
okay.
but I'm in charge. So next question. Okay. Oh, no, we skipped one. That's not fair. Okay, that one. Right. Maxime, how do relationships factor into egoism? If egoism is about pursuing what we want / our true desires, can we have relationships? In brackets, given they are about to give and take, therefore self-sacrifice.
Okay. Well, I think this is conflating a self-sacrifice with trade-offs. So giving and taking, it depends what you're giving and what you're taking, right? Of course, it's not simply that egoism permits relationships. Egoism requires relationships. It would be very difficult to be completely happy if you lived alone on a desert island. Now, I think it would be possible, but it would require some serious psychological work. It would be very difficult, right? Not to mention the actual work required just to survive, right? Yeah, as if that would leave any time for like philosophy, right?
Yeah, that's so true.
So, no. If marriage is happy, for instance, it's because both the people in that marriage love each other and they want to be in that marriage. So if two objectivists, two egoists get married, it's because they both want to gain something from that relationship. And just think about how perverse it would be if it were the other way around. If it was something like, if your husband or wife said to you, look, I don't really love you, but I feel sorry for you, and I know that I'm supposed to be an altruist, so here I am sacrificing. I mean, that would be quite insulting, right? So, hope that answers the question.
Yeah, well, I've got something to say about that. Because again, we're by that suggestion, and I don't know if you meant this intentionally, but how I heard it is that it's love is defined by when it feels good. But in my experience, love is often best demonstrated and reflected when it's difficult and it's hard, and sometimes the love that I show the people in my world that I deeply care about has come at the expense of something I had to let go of in myself. And so I'm not saying it's the only form of love, but certainly the idea, I've been married for 15 years, and certainly marriage isn't always this feeling of happiness, but love that's been consistent there has been expressed in many different ways, and there's certainly multiple times for love to be enriched and love to be developed. It would not have happened unless I self-sacrificed. And if I kept saying, well, honey, this week I'm not doing any self-sacrificing. Now, having said that, because we're not maniacs, we go, hey, you need a week off, go snowboarding in Japan, to which I delightfully oblige to do regularly, But by the same token, love in that space can't be defined by simply just, this make me feel good in the moment. Often love is defined by the idea of, am I willing to sacrifice for this other person's well-being, not my own?
I'm Team Jono, so sorry. Mainly because, there's more, relationships, there is give and take. And I guess I'm not sort of an expert in egoism, so I won't mention that, but there is a requirement of give and take, and that's the reality of relationships. And depending what's happening for you, depending on what sort of stage of life you're in, we lean on people, and it's not a bad thing to rely on someone else. And it's also, I think it depends on the extent. So if you don't want to marry someone, you do it anyway, it's probably not going to work out. But relationships change, life changes, you go through hard times, people go through different challenges. You can go through having to review that paragraph for the 14th time. You need support with that, whatever that looks like, right? So there's different parts of it, and I think, again, it's the balance, and it's, if it's one-sided, that's not healthy, that's not good, and someone loses out. And someone, I guess the other side is always getting the support and not getting the other side, but it requires both.
No, you can't. I'm sorry.
He wants to clarify.
Oh, you know what? You're making me feel bad. Go on. Go on, make a
Well,
remark.
don't make these decisions out of pity for me. You know?
Oh.
So is that
By no
guilt?
means.
Is that guilt?
This is egoism. no, go
So,
for it.
no, just want to clarify. Again, I'm not endorsing doing whatever you feel like in the moment, right? If you're in a loving relationship and something is irritating you that's minor, you can work it out rationally, or if it's really minor, tolerate it, whatever, like, right? So that's all fine. Because I've already established, and I agree with Jono on this, that short-term hedonism leads to terrible consequences for oneself, right? But that's what makes it bad. It doesn't work. So I'm not endorsing going by feeling. So I agree with everything you said, except for your use of the word sacrifice, because again, sacrifice is not a trade-off. It is losing something. It is harming yourself. Now, to make a trade-off, for instance, I want my peace and quiet, and my wife is very upset about something, and she is leaning on me for emotional support. It's a very rational trade-off to decide, okay, I'm going to forego this peace and quiet. I want to have lying down doing nothing and talk to her about whatever problem she's having. That is rational because I value my wife. That's why she's my wife. I'm not married. If I were to have a wife, that would be. Yeah.
Okay, right. Well, let's move on to the next question. Just giving you a heads up, it's almost going to be 8:30. We'll probably go over by just a bit, but hopefully you can be here for more of it. Or if you need to go, you can go. We're all adults here. Right, next question. Maxim, you, I can't read. Premised your talk. What? Premised.
Do you want me to read it?
No, I don't want you to read it. That's my job. Okay. Wait. No. What's going on? Where's the next question?
There it is. Good question.
There we go. You premised your talk with the meta-ethical position that our biology determines our ethics, which is to pursue rational desires. Why are my desires ultimately any more important than others?
Okay, so for those who don't know, meta-ethics is the study of what facts create the need for ethics, or at least that would be the way Rand would probably approach it. So meta-ethics is sort of one step back from ethics. It's asking what makes ethics necessary or true, and yeah. So our biology doesn't determine our ethics exactly. Ayn Rand's argument is that we have a rational faculty. Now, the fact that we have that faculty is biologically determined. That's what it means to be a human being, is to have this rational faculty. And because we have this rational faculty, part of which is, of course, our free will, our ability to make genuine choices in the face of alternatives, we have to ensure that we make the right choices. So we need a science that guides our actions. We need a science that helps us identify what is in fact going to be good for us, what the standard of that is our life. It's not our happiness. Happiness is the purpose of morality, but the standard of morality is life. Why my desires are more important than another's? Well, desires aren't the standard. The desires themselves have to be rational, right? An irrational desire, like having your 5th ice cream when you're on a diet, that is an irrational desire. You should not indulge it. But provided the desire is rational, what makes it more important to me is that it is my desire. And we have to keep in mind that every value presupposes a valuer. There's no such thing as just a value floating around in the air. Every value is tied to some good provided to the organism for which it is a value.
Yeah. So you said every value requires a valuer.
Yes.
That's God.
God can't have values, because if he did exist, which he does not,
How do you know that?
Whoa.
if the standard of evidence for the existence of anything is the inability to disprove it, then everything
one standard, though.
everything exists, right?
Yeah.
The fairies exist too, because I can't disprove that they don't exist. I can't prove that they don't exist, because there's nothing to go off. But anyway, setting that
Rationality, though, like I'm coming back, you talked about these values came from a valuer, right? And I agree with you.
Yeah.
So, and you say they're not floating out there. So there has to be a universal basis in which to measure. Could you use the term good in your talks tonight? You've used the word ought. Where does the ought come from?
Right.
And why is this unique to us? And how did this become distinct with us compared to the rest of the animal kingdom?
Very good question. So, the concept value presupposes the concept life. It is only the concept life that makes the concept of value possible. This is part of Rand's argument. So, if there were no living organisms, if there was just rocks and volcanoes and whatever, then there would be no need for, there would be no value, because a value is what differentiates organisms, living organisms, from inanimate matter is the fact that a living organism is engaged in a process of self-sustaining, self-generated action to remain what it is, to remain in existence. A rock can just sit there, it doesn't do anything to remain in existence, right? It has no alternatives. I mean, it could be destroyed by some natural event or not. Either way, it can't do anything about it. It's just what it is. An organism has a certain process of survival, and that process requires it to get the things from the external environment that it needs, the values. Those are the values. So it is, all values are relational to some individual organism. Now, moral values pertain only to human beings, because unlike plants and animals, we don't have determined courses of behavior. For example, we can feel hunger, but we don't have an instinct for how to get food. We use our reason. Yes? I mean, maybe we have an instinct for chewing the food or something, but not for figuring out how to kill the mammoth and skin it and cook it and so on. So that's what creates the concept of moral value.
I'm not convinced about how that separates us from the animals. Because where did this distinction arise from?
Well, morality applies to human beings, but not to animals, because human beings make choices.
But so do animals.
I disagree. So, animals follow instincts. They have pre-programmed courses of behavior written into their genetic code that tell them, if this happens, do this. If this happens, do this. Human beings don't have these kinds of deterministic.
Why was that written differently?
Well, if you're trying to argue that it was because of God.
No, I'm following your logic. We're talking about logic, right? That's what this whole night's for. So I'm following the logic of your reason. I'm trying to learn from this.
Well, at some point in our evolution, we would have evolved free will. And from that point onward, of course, we don't know exactly, at what point exactly it evolved and so on, but it's certainly one of the distinguishing characteristics of our species, our rationality / our free will. They're really one and the same. So,
yeah.
Okay. We are going to go to the next question.
Again, we're just getting good.
Maybe for you. No. Hey?
who is this for?
For the dog.
I think it's for everyone. Yeah. So, if you are living in a fortunate position, is it morally wrong for you to be unhappy because there is someone out there who is in a less fortunate position than you?
I don't know if I can comment on the moral aspect of it specifically. Maybe that's more of a Maxim component. But it is interesting that we, and so many people will experience low mood and sadness and depression, and then you look at anything online pretty much, and you see people who don't have a house, who don't have food, who don't have the basic things in life. And then there's this almost secondary feeling that we get of guilt, because why do I feel terrible when my situation's, and I say this in inverted commas, not that bad, right? Like, we've probably all had it at some point where you think, and sometimes people use it as like a coping thing. Someone else has got it worse than you. You should be fine. You shouldn't feel this way. Someone else, it's always worse off. But yes, I don't know that's necessarily, I won't comment so much on the morality of it, but it's still part of the human experience. Just because someone else has it worse doesn't invalidate your personal experience. So I think viewing it as something that you should or shouldn't feel places expectation where it's actually not needed or it's not valuable. So, yeah.
Yeah, it almost works in the inverse as well, I think. We can look at someone who seems to have it all and to be happy, and I don't have what they have, and then I can feel like, oh man, I don't have what it takes. I don't have the means to make me happy. But I'm conscious if you have a basis of values that determine how you live and how you treat people, and how you value whether something is healthy or ill towards your neighbor, and you live according to that. Sometimes the sense of fulfillment isn't with the result, it's in the course. So it's like irrespective of the outcome of how I'm living, because I've decided to live by a particular moral code or a moral way of life, or any moral standing for that matter, that's the part of me that I sense fulfillment, irrespective of my emotions that come from it. So I would say if you find yourself in a position, just to be straight to the point, if you find yourself in a fortunate position, and it's led you to be feelings of happy and fulfillment, man, you hang on to that with everything you got and share it. Like, don't keep it to yourself. If you found yourself in the fortunate position of intellect or means or capacity or resources or personality, let your light shine. Let people experience the good you've got and share with the world what you have. And I think it's a good way of keeping our ego in check as well, and be grateful for what we've got.
I'll be very quick on this. There's probably somebody out there happier than me. And I would love for them to be even happier. I mean, I wish them well. It's like, why should I want them to be less happy as a result? Happiness is not a competition. If happy people, genuinely happy people, make other people around them happier. So happiness is not some zero-sum, we're not in some zero-sum contest for who can be the happiest person, right? No, I mean, the person in a less fortunate position than me hopefully doesn't want me to be less happy as a result.
Awesome. By the way, someone can pull me to one side and like, I really want this question asked in light of this question, right? But anyway, we're going to go for 2 or 3 more. So next one. Does altruism apply to those who have already passed away? As in, can you live for someone else's sake even if they aren't alive?
Golly.
Remember, we don't have all night. So let's make it brief.
Yeah.
Well, as a matter of fact, yes, people can practice altruism for people who aren't even alive, which is completely absurd. And I wouldn't recommend it, because I wouldn't recommend altruism. But to sacrifice yourself for someone who won't get anything because they're not even around anymore is just that's another whole level of stupid. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's other things. There's certain values. Say if someone's built something of worth and merit in the world, call it an organization or a family or a civilization, and they've passed, and you see the value in what they built, and you're like, I believed in what they began. You might see a part of your life as, I want to continue to contribute my part to what they started, they began, and you can be inspired by their example, you can be inspired by what they've done, and that can still drive you, I guess, to your definition of altruism, that's self-sacrificing. I think there are morally positive ways that you can go about that. I mean, that's where most cultures have come from, is because people have given their life for certain ideals, and courageous. You were talking about courage before. People have been very courageous and given their life away, and they began something, and I want to continue in their footsteps. So maybe there is something.
I don't think I have anything to add. Yeah.
Great question, though. Yikes.
Next question. Jono.
Oh, man.
The Bible. The Bible says,
To those who have will be given, to those who have will be given, while those who have not will lose the little that they have.
More will be given.
Hey?
It's supposed to say, to those who have,
Yes.
more will be given.
Yeah, that's Matthew 25, parable of the talents. How does this sit against your morality of self-sacrifice?
Yeah, cool question. So this idea that Jesus taught about here was about stewardship, right? So your uses this term talent. So some people might be given 1, some 5, some 10. So to call it maybe being inheritor of great financial worth or great physical worth or great intellectual worth, whatever your talent is, however you can define it. And your role is to be a good steward of that. And part of being a good steward is that, according to Jesus, is that you wouldn't just hang on to what you've got. You'd actually make more of it. And so you'd have more to share around. And the principle here is, Jesus was saying, if you can prove yourself a good steward of what you have, you'll be entrusted with more. And anyone who's tried to build a career, build a family, build anything of worth will know that it takes an awful lot of self-sacrifice to build anything of merit and value. You can easily, and I think this is what Jesus was criticizing, the life that got given a life, and yet they just sat on it and they did nothing with it. And he called them wicked and lazy. Now, it would have seemed like the easy choice, the one where I don't want to sacrifice my time and put in effort, I'm just going to sit on what I've got. And Jesus called him wicked and lazy. But for those who took the self-sacrificial way, built something, made something of worth and value, says that's someone I'm going to trust with more. That's how I'd see it aligned with the morality of self-sacrifice.
All right, last one.
Chloe.
Dum, dum, dum.
You mentioned that with both self-interest and self-sacrifice, it's a push and pull sort of approach. Is it possible to have a status state where both are fulfilled? Have you seen that lived out? I guess that's what it says.
Short answer is yes, sort of. So a stasis, yes, but not a stagnant stasis. So that's essentially what we aim for in therapy when people come with, being on one side or the other, an unhealthy version of one. So the idea is to have something that is a little more aligned. So people putting in boundaries with people or with their time. It's around, people learning how to be more assertive in their communication. Whatever that is, so how do we develop the skills and the ability and the confidence to be a little more in the middle in terms of what that sort of balancing act looks like. And yeah, I say push-pull because, it's not a stagnant approach. It's not like you just tick off and say, yes, I do 1 hour volunteering a week. Yes, I say no to 3 things a week. It's not this tick box kind of approach that we can take. That would be so lovely, but it's just not reality. And it does change. Different relationships require different approaches. Things and different, for some of us, the idea of saying no to your mum, that's not an option. Whereas in other cultures, it's absolutely okay, right? Right? It's just not a thing. So we have to respect that and honour that and go, actually, there are certain situations where it's just not good for me. It's not good for the situation. It's not good for the relationship to say no in certain situations. Whereas in other situations, that's absolutely required and absolutely necessary. So that's where that push-pull and that's where that balancing act comes in.
Okay, well, I'm going to give time for final remarks, if you've got any, and then I'll bring us to a close. So, we don't have tons of time for final remarks, so it's going to be like 1 or 2 minutes. But if you did feel like, I feel like I need to articulate this point to a close, based off everything that we've discussed, what would you say? I can start with Maxim if you want.
Sure, I'll be quick. I'll just self-promote. If people want to follow my work, the best thing they can do is go on objectivism.au. So that's the company I run. We have volunteers. If you'd like to get involved, please approach me. Always looking to engage with people interested in Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism. So objectivism.au, you can also find my Instagram by just searching my full name, Maxim Bishev, B-I-S-H-E-V. Okay, and it's been wonderful, so thank you for your time.
I don't really have any final points. I feel like I made all of mine before, but yes, just thank you for being here and asking questions and being engaged in the process.
Yeah, I don't have anything additional to add other than what I said at the start. I honestly respect students who would come out and engage in public discourse and conversation. I think it says a lot about your hunger and eagerness to learn and your humility, and it means you've got a pretty great future ahead of you. It's a good job of you.
Awesome. Right, well, that was Logos Forum. So I'll just, thank you for coming. Let me can we give a hand to our amazing guest speakers? Thank you. Awesome.